The organizers are hoping for probably 1 million protesters taking to the streets of Washington, D.C. Right now, as you can see behind me, on the steps of this Lincoln Memorial, people have started gathering slowly for one of these big protests. The Lincoln Memorial, of course, a very important symbol in the history of the United States, because this is where Martin Luther King had delivered that historic I Have a Dream speech 57 years ago. So, of course, it is very important, the Lincoln Memorial. But this is not the only place where protesters have gathered, because this is not one organization leading one protest. These are multiple groups, multiple protests, nearly a dozen protests all across the city. There are people currently gathered at the White House in front of Congress, and they will be moving around throughout the city throughout the day, at times joining forces, at times splitting off and going to different locations. And the idea was really not to have a leader, not to see this as an organized march, but more of people coming together to express their anger at what happened to George Floyd, but also more widely at the systemic racism that has crippled the United States for centuries now. And protesters, of course, here starting slowly, but they are expecting tens of thousands and hoping, of course, for 1 million.
Now, Ketavan, in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, President Donald Trump has been calling for officials to put their feet down somewhat. But several states are now demanding that police forces actually act more responsibly.
Yes, the message of the President of the United States, that message of law and order, isn't really getting a lot of echo across the United States, because you're seeing not only, of course, protesters and organizers asking for police restraint during these demonstrations, but also police departments and local authorities themselves taking steps to make sure that that restraint actually takes place when there are tens of thousands of people out on the streets. If you take, for example, the city of Seattle, the police department there has banned the use of tear gas to disperse these protests for the next 30 days. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, they have announced that they will be banning officially the use of chokeholds, any chokehold, one similar to the one that killed George Floyd. And right here in the District of Columbia, the mayor of Washington, Muriel Bowser, who has lifted the state of emergency, lifted the curfew in place in the city, and has requested in an official letter to the President of the United States that he remove all extraordinary federal law enforcement and military. She wants to give the streets back to these peaceful protesters, and she is calling for all of this to take place, of course, in peace, in calm, but with that message of Black Lives Matter, which has been sprawled all over 16th Street, right across from the White House.